Welcome to the Premier League Proven Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff, with my co-host and brother, Kevin. But who do you have in our vaunted top four, which honestly may not be as important because it could be the top five this year, but the top four are the definite champion teams that we think are making the Champions League for next season. And it's kind of considered a successful season for any team is making the top four because it guarantees the Champions League next year and brings you in that money. So who do you got in fourth?
So who I have in fifth, because I jumped Newcastle so high up, I actually have United.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that ridiculousness.
I have United finishing in fifth.
Wow, all right. They finished third place last year, so a team that was doing well. What do you think about them?
I don't know if I believe in Ten Hag. I think he is a good manager.
Wow, controversial take after controversial take. I like
it. That's what we're here for, to give you a less informed opinion on.
That's what you're here for. I'm here to give you the right thing.
Again, we're going to take a look at the spreadsheet at the end of the year, and we'll see. The only team that prediction I put money against is going to be Spurs in the top six. So just know I'm not backing up a lot of these with putting anything behind them. Let's put it that way. But I have United sitting at fifth. I think Mason Mount is a good player. Now, I personally think he is probably a little bit better than Maddison, but I don't know. It's just a team that, at least from my perspective, has not been well run. Yeah, they spend a lot of money on players that don't always pan out. The core of the team has definitely changed, I guess, a little bit significantly year to year. So this is a team I know you have a lot more insight on, and your prediction is probably significantly higher than mine is, but just not sold on them being a guarantee lock for top four.
So do you think they're just they finished third last year and they've added to that team, haven't lost many contributors to that? Do you think it's just a tougher league this year with Liverpool probably getting back to the four? I think Newcastle maybe pushing on and Chelsea growing as well.
I think it's exactly what I'm talking about. And, last year was a weird freak year where it's just Spurs, Chelsea, Liverpool all kind of not really falling in. So the top spots were a little bit more open than they've usually been. And this year it'll be interesting to see kind of how these teams rebound and to see if they can kind of go back to the form that's expected of them.
So I think you think, because I think most people think that Manchester City are going to win the league. They think that United, Liverpool, and Arsenal will finish second, third, and fourth in some order. I think with most people thinking Arsenal finishing second. So I actually have United a little bit the opposite of you. And to caveat this, I am a Manchester United fan. But I have United finishing second, and I think Erik ten Hag is going to prove himself to be one of the best managers in Europe. I think he already has. He took Ajax to the Champions League places where they beat Madrid. That was probably one of the best teams in Europe, and they were working with a budget probably 50 times less than a Premier League team. And the amount of turmoil and chaos that this team was in when they lost their first two games last year under Ten Hag, mostly because of the disastrous season that they had under Ole and Rangnick the year before, meant that this team was in chaos, just in kind of shambolic circumstances. And the thing with Manchester United is everything is bigger with United. They are probably the most famous club in England. And so when anything goes poorly, they get a ton of the credit and a lot of plaudits, and people talk about them a ton when things go well. But when things go poorly, they get piled on and destroyed more than I think any other team in England, just because whatever good or bad, their name writes headlines and sells news. So they were in a terrible position. Ten Hag was able to masterfully turn that around. I think he handled the Cristiano Ronaldo situation, where Cristiano Ronaldo is kind of a huge egomaniac and not as good as he used to be. And he was able to kind of get him out of the club successfully. He's also able to strip Harry Maguire of the captaincy. And I think he's building a team. And I think the best way to describe them, whereas Manchester City is a possession team, Ten Hag has said that he wants to turn Manchester United into the best transition team in the world. And what that means is because it's not exactly how his Ajax team played, but when you have Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford, essentially your two best players, being those type of really aggressive, really fast team players that are able to, that don't necessarily fit a possession side, but fit more of a counterattacking side. He's going to try to play to their strengths. I think the biggest issue with United last year is that of all the top 6 teams, they didn't score enough goals. They scored the least of all those top 6 teams. They had a really good defensive record.
No, that's exactly what I was going to ask you about, and that's at least the piece that I get as someone who's not as intimate with United, but does watch them from afar. I guess, do you believe in the attackers that are there? Because it just seems like it's year after year, they're always searching for, a new striker. They're always looking for, new attacking players to fill some of those gaps. And what I will say from watching Rashford over the last year or two, he's impressed me so much. I know there's a time that he was kind of like, they're, very into him. Not sure if he was going to be the guy, but last year, every game I've ever watched from him from last year, I was wholeheartedly impressed. But do you think, the big spendings on Sancho or Anthony or Garnacho, do you kind of think those are guys that you can kind of rely on to kind of score some more of those goals? Or do you think they kind of need to focus a little more and figure out who else can get some goals for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Rashford did turn the corner. He had a horrible year the year before last, but last year it was his best ever season. So I think he's shown that he could turn that left wing position into he's one of the best kind of left wingers in the entire world, but he's not a perfect striker. I do think Jadon Sancho has kind of been a failure. They're paying him incredible amounts of money, and I'm not sure he's ever going to quite turn it around. They've been trying him in a false 9 role, which is kind of a withdrawn striker and hopefully he'll be able to kind of push on from there. Anthony, I think they spent a ton of money on him, and I don't think you could say that he fully rewarded that last year, but I think Ten Hag looks at him also for his off-ball contributions, where he really gives them that structure. And actually, it is interesting because as there's left-footed wingers are playing on the right side, I don't think there's very many good right wingers in the entire world. It's really hard to find those guys. A guy like Mo Salah is gold if you can get one of them. So Anthony, I think, will have a better year this year. I do think he is a really good player. I think he brings all the things that Erik Ten Hag wants. So I think he'll work out quite well. I think when you look at their attackers, Bruno Fernandes is, other than Kevin De Bruyne and maybe Martin Odegaard, he is probably the best attacking midfielder in the world. He created more chances than anyone in the Premier League last year, I think, outside of Kevin De Bruyne. And he created so many opportunities that they were just not able to finish. Garnacho is incredible. I mean, he's a youth player, right? So last year was his first year. He comes from the academy. He won them games on his own last year. He's one of these guys that I think they're hoping can go to the very top and be one of the absolute best players in the world. We'll see if he can kind of transition to that, but I think the hopes for him, he's probably one of the single best players that's ever come out of the United youth teams, although they did bring him in from Spain, I think, when he was 16 or something. So Garnacho is one that is going to be, I think, a mainstay of this team for a long time. And then they have bought Rasmus Højlund for a lot of money, who is a big, tall, blonde Danish guy. Kind of name sounds like Erling Haaland, and he kind of looks like Erling Haaland a little bit. Big, tall, white guys. He's really fast like him. Erling Haaland, he has a big left foot like Erling Haaland, but I think he fits the mold of an aggressive transition team that Erik Ten Hag wants. He's injured right now, so it'll take him a couple weeks, I think, to get back into the team. But if you look at Manchester United and say they finished third last year and actually played quite well, they won the League Cup, they made the FA Cup final, and that's after a horrible start. And they did that while scoring the least amount of goals. So what happens in Erik Ten Hag's second season when he starts developing a more cohesive attacking unit, brings Højlund in, players like Anthony and settle in? Now they're able to score more goals than they did last year. What does that do to their ceiling? I think it only can raise it, because I don't think they're going to get any worse than they were last year. And I think they were able to do 75 points last year. So to me, the arrow on this team is trending up, up, up. They brought in Andre Onana, who I think De Gea is just completely unable to play back out from the back, which is a requisite for a modern goalkeeper. And so he's going to reinvent the way they play. For me, Manchester United is going to be the team that challenges City the closest this year for the title.
It's funny that you say their new striker sounds so much like Haaland. We can say it's the Wish.com version or the Walmart Great Value brand. But maybe I will be made a fool and see how United kind of does this year. And I will say Bruno Fernandes, every time I've watched him, especially when he came in his first year, it was beyond impressive. I don't know if I've ever seen a player just like slot into the Premier League so well. I mean, from the get-go, dude is just scoring goals and assists left and right. So completely.
I think he's the type of player that he complains a ton and everyone kind of hates him and he dives around a lot. But yeah, I mean, the guy comes in and he dominates the ball. He does give it away a lot, but he makes the team run through him in a way that only a player that has the type of confidence that's needed to succeed at a club as heavily scrutinized as United will have. And so I think, he's now their captain. And I think hopefully he can take that next level too. All right, so I think now we got 3 teams left. Most people have Arsenal finishing second after City and think that they're going to even be the team that potentially pushes City to the end and potentially even wins the Premier League this year. I have them in 4th. Where did you put them?
So I have Arsenal at 3rd, and I think we're probably both gonna, if people are listening to this that have.
All the Arsenal fans are going to be very upset with us.
It's exactly as I say.
We're very, very upset with us because I do have to say the Gunners are the most social media heavy team. I think the Arsenal presence on the internet is unparalleled and their meme potential is also unparalleled.
I have to say, take what I say with a grain of salt always. I for all cards on the table, I'm a Spurs fan. Arsenal and Spurs have a lot of a rivalry. But just after last year, they bottled the league. I know people don't like to say that, and all the Arsenal fans were basically saying, "Oh, you can't say that. This is a new team, yada yada yada." But I mean, they were on top of the league for, was it 80-90% of the year? And just when it kind of came to the finish line, they didn't quite make it. I think, just like we've talked about with a lot of the other teams, they are going to struggle a little bit more now that they have the Champions League to kind of contest with. And there's always something with teams that kind of sneak in there and kind of outpunch where you expect them. You kind of take teams by surprise where they're not maybe preparing for you as much as they might be. And that's not to say that Arsenal was, a small team before then by any means. Obviously one of the most successful English clubs of all time. But there was a lot of time and years that they were just not quite the best team in the Big Six. But now I think they have everybody on notice. People are going to prepare. People are going to take time to kind of prepare for them. But I will wholeheartedly admit they are an incredible team. Saka and Odegaard, every time I watch the two of them play, I am just blown away that these two guys that are so young are able to do what they can. They handle pressure and score so many goals incredibly well. Again, those two players can't say enough big things. I think it's interesting kind of with our Arteta there. He's a disciple. So he was actually a player not too long ago at Arsenal, but then he went to City and kind of became a disciple of Pep Guardiola. So he's kind of become and kind of embodied a lot of Pep's ideas. And his first couple seasons at Arsenal didn't quite go so well. I personally think if they didn't win an FA Cup, he probably would have been sacked. Wouldn't be the manager at Arsenal anymore. But hey, they weathered the storm, and last year really paid off. It's a little bit interesting because I don't think they really have a true number 9. If you look at it last year, it was about 3 or 4 guys kind of like split the goals, which is not a bad thing. A lot of guys scoring 10 plus goals.
I thought that I was going to be bold by putting Arsenal in 4th, but hearing you say all that, it almost makes me want to put them higher because I think this Arsenal team is incredible. Because this Arsenal team, I think, truly has a very good chance of winning the title. I do think they're the second best team in England, which is maybe a weird thing to say when I'm saying they're going to maybe finish 4th, but I would also push back that they kind of bottled the league last year. They did a little bit in that sense, but Manchester City last year won, I think, their last 11 league games. Manchester City is just the most dominant force. They were by far the best team in the world last year. So I think there's no shame. There's no negativity that's associated with losing the title to the best team in the world. That they shouldn't feel badly about that. Obviously, they had a good chance to win it, but that was ahead of schedule. Much like Newcastle, I don't think anybody had pegged Arsenal to finish any better than like fourth place last year, and they were able to kind of push City for the title. I hear what you're saying, that they don't have, because I think Jesus is unreliable. He finished under his XG, and he almost always does, because he basically does every single thing well for a striker. He's aggressive, he presses, he passes, he holds the ball up, he links up play. He just can't quite score at the level of truly great strikers, which, I don't know, is kind of important for strikers. But the fact that they have Trossard for a backup for him, the fact that Saka is going to give them 15 goals, Martinelli, who's an incredible player, is going to give them 15 goals, Odegaard's going to give them 10 goals, and you add a player like Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, who they combined spent 170 million on. They've revamped the team, taken what was one of the absolute best teams in Europe last year, who blew two teams away with their attacking power last year, and added $100 million Declan Rice, who's one of the great young English players. Not, he's coming into his prime now, not as young anymore, but one of the great English midfielders that's in the game today. And maybe Kai Havertz. I'm not very high on the Kai Havertz signing, just because I don't think he quite has the approach and mentality. Although it's hard to judge, obviously, and I'm projecting a lot, but I don't think he quite has that mentality that a top level team and a team like Arsenal will want. They're maybe replacing their goalkeeper with David Raya, or at least pushing Aaron Ramsdale, which I think was the one place in their team that was a weakness. But you look at William Saliba, he is one of the absolute best center backs in the league. He absolutely dominated last year. So to me, Arsenal is absolutely one of the best teams in the league. I have a feeling that there's a chance that they go on and win the title, and will look really dumb. The reason I put them in fourth, and you've just listened to me basically tell you how good they are, is that I'm not quite convinced, just like you are. And again, I will say that conventional wisdom probably disagrees with us here, that Arteta is that top level manager. And I almost think things kind of came too easily for them last year. They had a 20, 30 game run where they just blew teams away. And so how are they going to do this year if they contend with the Champions League, have a few injuries to their starting 11? Because I don't think they had very many significant injuries other than to Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko last year. They've tried to replace those guys in terms of having backups for them, but I just think Arsenal I think last year may have been the best that they're going to look. And again, that's a controversial opinion. Even though we're putting them third and fourth, I don't want you guys to come away with this thinking that Arsenal is not a good team, because I think almost everyone in the world has them as the second best team in the league. We just are a little bit more down on them, probably because we just don't quite believe in Arteta as much. But he could prove us all wrong, go on and win the league. But I wouldn't be surprised if they don't do super well this year and pressure starts building on him, because I think aside from Manchester United, the pressure, especially from the fans, grows. It gets to be toxic if things are not going well. So I do think it's something to keep an eye out, but this could be something that really comes back to bite us in terms of our predictions.
Are you telling me that Arsenal Fan TV is a toxic media outlet?
They've turned it into a good brand though, so good for them.
Think of like a Stephen A. Smith kind of, but just about your own fan base and just giving terrible takes and just promoting the toxicity when a team is losing. That's Arsenal Fan TV. These guys who kind of sit there on YouTube and just rag on the team, and if you feel bad about how your team's doing, they make you feel a little bit worse. But they made a lot of money doing it, so I guess good on them.
I think a lot of other fans like to watch that. I think they probably do better when Arsenal is doing poorly.
Yeah, my favorite thing is when they do the live watches and when they lose games that way. It's always funny to see the clips where they're talking about how they have this game in the bag and then a couple goals go in and everybody just gets really upset.
But I think Arsenal fans are incredibly optimistic, though, and I think this is the best Arsenal team since probably 2006 or 2005. So, this is an incredible team.
So I have Arsenal at 3, and speaking of a fan base that this is always our year, or next year is always our year, so we can probably say, if you're, again, an NFL fan, probably this would be analogous to the Dallas Cowboys, except this team actually wins some stuff. And that's who I have in 4th place is going to be Liverpool.
Yeah, that's what they were. But now in the last 5 years since Klopp came in, they win everything. And if it wasn't for City, they'd have gone down as the best ever team.
I agree. Then whatever state Liverpool is in, I don't know how they do it, but they just do well in the Champions League. That's just their competition for English teams. I don't know what they have in the water over there. Obviously, it's not trickling in. They have a different system than what Everton has, but whatever's in the Liverpool specific stadium water, they just find a way anytime in the Champions League.
Except they lost 2 finals to Madrid. If it wasn't for Madrid and City, Liverpool would have been the best team in the last 5 years. They would have won everything.
It's a team that really underperformed last year, and just like Jeff said, Jurgen Klopp, one of the best managers in the world, and has consistently been so. But their team that is always going to be up there in the conversation for the top 4. And I think what last year happened, it was definitely a blip. It's not going to be something that kind of stays that way. A team that is probably gone through a little bit of a renovation of their team. Last year, they brought in some new players. They spent a ton of money on a new striker, going to be Darwin, and he really did not fit very well last year. I mean, again, a little bit overshadowed by Holland going to City and actually absolutely smashing it out of the park. But he didn't really fit as much as they spent there. But they have some really exciting players. Trent Alexander-Arnold, so he was playing right back for Liverpool for a long time, and one of the best crossers in all of soccer throughout the world. The dude is a phenomenal athlete and is so good at taking and beating a man and whipping a cross in.
Yeah, I think this team is really interesting because this is a reinvention under Klopp, because last year was the worst year since Klopp had shown up when he first joined. And Jurgen Klopp in Liverpool was just the perfect match. Jurgen Klopp is literally the manager. I mean, Pep Guardiola is Pep Guardiola, but Jurgen Klopp is the manager that every single team wants for their own team. Every single team in the world that isn't Manchester City would kill to have Jurgen Klopp. I mean, he gets it. He gets it for the city. He plays such fun footy. He plays really aggressive style. He's all about the attack. His players absolutely adore him. His players love him. The fans love him. So Jurgen Klopp, I think, is in every way essentially the perfect manager. He does, in his last 2 jobs at Dortmund and Mainz, he stayed only 7 years, and I think he's reaching that 7-year mark. So whether that's kind of something where he kind of is coming to the end of the cycle, I think this year is actually really critical in determining whether this is kind of the beginning of a new era under Klopp or the end of Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool. This Liverpool team has an incredible attack. I would put their attack up with anybody in the entire world. They're 5 players: Cody Gakpo, Mo Salah, Luis Diaz, Darwin Nunez, and Diego Jota. Those guys combined are lethal, like so dangerous. They will score so many goals. This team going forward is incredible. The problem is, and there's these memes where they like cut the Ferrari into thirds, and it's like a horse-drawn buggy in the back with the Ferrari in the up top and in the middle. The biggest problem they had last year is that they just could not. They were just so soft underneath. They were great going forward, but they would just give up so many just weak goals because they could not defend properly. The system was weirdly structured where Fabinho looked really old and just did not have a good season from defensive midfield. So this year they've kind of reinvented themselves. They've bought Alexis McAllister from Brighton. They've bought Szoboszlai, this Hungarian kind of attacking box-to-box midfielder from RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga. So they've tried to reinvent their midfield while selling their captain, Jordan Henderson, and Fabinho to Saudi Arabia. But the problem is, even though they've reinvented it, they haven't actually put somebody in the engine room. This is all assuming that they don't actually buy Moises Caicedo from Brighton, and they just came in over 110 million, I think. But it sounds like he actually wants to go to Chelsea, which is all hilarious. But if this team can find a defensive midfielder, and I'd say my prediction is contingent upon that, and I think they will because the transfer market is still open for 2 more weeks, with Andy Robertson, Van Dijk, Alisson, who for my money is the best goalkeeper in the entire world. He's so good at one-on-ones. That combined with this reinvention of Trent Alexander-Arnold as this kind of was a right back, like you were saying, and still plays there, but kind of comes in and inverts, which is the inverted fullback is an interesting tactical phenomenon that's been going on in the Premier League recently that Manchester City does, Arsenal does, Liverpool does, where the fullback, instead of providing width, kind of comes in and plays defensive midfielder. And so he's able to kind of spray passes and do the famed quarterback of the soccer field thing that he's really good at. So this Liverpool team, I agree with you, last year was a blip. But they really need to figure out their defensive midfield. That's so important. And are they able to do that in the transfer market? If so, I mean, if they can complete that piece of the puzzle, this team going forward is so dangerous that I can't help but imagine them just blowing teams away in the Premier League. So for me, I have them finishing third. I would not be surprised, though, if they can kind of put it all together, that they'd be challenging at the top of the league as well.
Which puts us to, I think we've talked about everybody here in some form of the thing. So going to have Liverpool at 4, Arsenal 3, and then my bold prediction, I wouldn't say my lock of the year, but Newcastle at 2nd. And I think you have Arsenal at 4, Liverpool at 3, United at 2, and then finally, who we both have in our number 1 slot. This is the least surprising prediction, and probably the safest money that you can put out there as far as betting goes. It's going to be Manchester City sitting at the top of the league.
Yeah, I mean, they won the treble last year. Obviously, this team is amazing. You take Pep Guardiola's structure, all of the attacking players they have, Phil Foden, Jack Grealish. They've lost a couple guys like Mahrez and Gundogan, but they still have Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne. And then you add Erling Haaland, who is legitimately just the next best player. Like, he is the anointed one. You know, he is unreal. Like, this guy scores from every position. He's fast. He's strong. He can head the ball. He can do every single thing that you want from an attacking player. He dominated, absolutely shredded the Premier League last year, and he absolutely will again. There's a lot of people that said, he was joining the wrong team because City doesn't feed him the ball enough. He doesn't fit their possession style. But I think the interesting thing is that the only thing that stopped Haaland is that he actually got injured quite a lot, especially when he was in Dortmund. But he didn't get injured at all last year. And I'm not sure if that's partly because they play in such a possession-based team. He doesn't have to do quite as much of those explosive runs. They don't have to rely on him like he would a team like if you were playing for Manchester United or Arsenal or Chelsea or Tottenham, he would just be up top every game. They'd be asking him to score 20 goals, or 50 goals. They'd be asking him to score every game. He doesn't quite have that same pressure at City because they just blow teams away. And then you just look at Manchester City. Pep has created this like 4 center back approach, and it's made their defensive line like just unbreakable. Essentially, nobody can get close to them. I mean, the only hope that you have that this team is not going to be the best team in the world again is that they have been climbing this mountain trying to win this Champions League for like the last decade. And now that they've done it, will there be a bit of a hangover after that? I mean, I think that's literally it. But Pep Guardiola is not the type of guy to rest on his laurels. He is ruthless. He is competitive. He wants to win everything. And I think he'll demand that from the players. So, the only hope for me that anybody else can win the league this year is that Manchester City just has a little bit of a motivation issue. But otherwise, this team has players upon players upon players. Their kind of depth in every position. They take a guy out and they replace him with a guy who's just as good, who would be one of the absolute best players on every other team. And this team is a machine. They are essentially the Terminator, if you're the team, and Erling Haaland is the Terminator up front. So, I mean, I don't see how anybody can really beat this team over a 38-game season. And to be honest, I'm not sure anybody can beat them in the Champions League over a two-leg game either.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where, they're absolutely a dynasty. I think they've won 6 of the last 7 Premier Leagues and
5 of the last 6.
5 of the last 6. Okay. So, and that's what Jeff was talking about. Is, Klopp is really the only one who is able to kind of dethrone them and kind of throw a wrench in their plan. But yeah, the team is just so good, and it's just
they're the Monstars, man. Like they're like when you watch Mighty Ducks, like they're the team that the Mighty Ducks are playing against. Except this is not a movie, and the Mighty Ducks are not going to win. Like they're just like they're like the evil empire, and Guardiola as Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah, you can't just start a quack, quack, quack chant and hit a few knuckle pucks and have your plot armor save you. That's Pep's going to be there. He's going to win, and you're going to go home, and you're going to be unhappy.
I think the only thing that and I think this is something that I've always tried to remind myself and when I'm watching soccer, is that things never look as good as they seem, and they're never as bad as they seem. I think both of those things are true. And so when you think there's no weaknesses to a team, that's often when you start seeing some things show through underneath, start to crumble a little bit. And when you have teams like Chelsea and Manchester United have awful seasons, in Spurs last year, I think you do see that it's not, the foundations tend to not be quite as bad as you think, and they do tend to rebound. So I think the only hope is that City is kind of, has those things, but it's really hard to imagine. It's not like their team is aging really that much. So hard to see anybody beat them. And then it's already been quite a long episode, but we'll just do a couple quick final predictions here. Golden Boot, who do you have?
Safe money again. We're going Haaland.
Yeah, I mean, that's so easy. The only way Haaland doesn't finish top scorer is if he gets injured. Guy's an absolute, I don't know, he's just crazy. Like, it's kind of sad because I think so many young kids are going to want to be Man City fans because Erling Haaland's so good. But I mean, it's fair. They're such a good team. But how about the more interesting Golden Boot for a player not named Erling Haaland?
So it's a little bit of a tougher question, but the only way I think Newcastle's going to get that second place is if their striker is on fire all year. So I'm going to say Isak is going to be my choice.
Oh wow, I love that. Yeah, Isak he's a very dangerous player. I think not many people have him at the top scorer. For me, I'm probably going to go Mo Salah. I think he's just been, other than Harry Kane for the last 5 years, the guy, he's also just on that extremely top tier level where he scores every year, nonstop. He produces, and Liverpool, even if they're a little soft going backwards, they're going to be great going forward. So going with Salah there. And then in the Premier League, they love sacking managers. It's the easiest thing to do is just change the manager. To get rid of your whole team costs a lot of money, but it's not too expensive to get rid of the manager. So how many managers are we losing this year? And then I want your prediction on at least one that's going to get fired.
So I'm going to go with 14 is going to be the line that
14? Holy hell, man.
Is going to be the line that I set here. And then...
But not 14 teams? Are you saying a couple guys that get hired are going to get fired?
Exactly. Higher fires like we saw with Chelsea, 3 times last year? And, again, I'm going to make another prediction here that's a little bit crazy. I don't think it's someone who's going to get sacked, but I do think Brighton's manager is going to get poached before the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout too. I'll go with 11 managers get sacked. Because I think it's always safe to go over half, which is crazy, right? But that doesn't happen in American sports. But the stakes are just so high here because you can't get relegated and you need the money if you're playing at the top end. And for a guy that's going to get sacked, let me go with Andoni Iraola, if I'm even saying that right, on Bournemouth, because I think his style, we talked about it in the last episode, but I think he has a chance to do well, but I think there's also a chance that his style just comes in, just doesn't work at all, and they just get rid of him and try to replace him and try to save their season. So I'll go with Bournemouth there. And then who do you think is going to be the best transfer of the window?
Probably a little biased, but I'm going to go James Maddison. I think it was a pretty reasonable fee, and I think he's going to be pretty instrumental in the Spurs recreation. What about yourself?
Yeah, I think Maddison's a good call because he's going to be the heartbeat, I think, of that Spurs attack, and just going to want them to go forward. I think there's a lot of candidates here. There's been so much money spent this year. Declan Rice was bought for over $100 million. Caicedo was bought for over $100 million. Højlund has a chance at United, but I'm not going to go with that biased pick. I think Sandro Tonali at Newcastle is going to be a guy that everyone's going to look for because he is a player that's bought from AC Milan, has played in the Champions League, and I think will turn Newcastle's midfield with Bruno Guimaraes and Joe Linton into one of the best midfields in the entire Premier League. And then what do you think of biggest flop of the year? And that's a transfer that failed.
So biggest flop for me is going to be Kai Havertz.
Oh, wow. I probably was going to use that one too.
Were you? I just don't really think he's going to fit that system super well. probably not a bad move to get some depth for Arsenal, but I just wasn't really convinced.
Yeah, they're asking him to play kind of a box-to-box midfielder, which I'm not sure he is.
Yeah, and I wasn't super convinced with him at Chelsea. I mean, it's just an awful lot of money to flop is usually based off of how much a player cost and how much value you think they're going to return. So I think there's a big ask with how expensive he was, and I just don't really see him fitting in the system.
And then for me, I'm going to go with, and I really did want to go with Kai Havertz here, so he's kind of the one I believed in a little bit more. I think there's a chance that either Declan Rice or Moises Caicedo don't come in because they're both and show that they're worth over 100 million, because it's hard to take a defensive midfielder and have them be worth over 100 million. They really have to have such a transformative impact on your team. And so I can easily imagine one of them, maybe Caicedo, just kind of, especially who's only had one good season in the Premier League, just kind of show why people do want quote unquote Premier League proven players and people that have been here longer, and why it actually is a lot of money to spend on a defensive midfielder. So I think those guys, Rice and Caicedo, will come in, and I think both of them will do reasonably well, but I think they're also going to not live up to their price tag.
If you're going to spend 100 million, I think you're absolutely right. You need peak N'Golo Kante to be your defensive midfielder. Yeah, it's just so much money on a position. So yeah, we'll see what they end up doing.
All right, and then we'll do a couple here. Bold prediction that you are willing to stand behind.
Bold prediction here is going to be Chelsea at 7th.
That is, I think Chelsea fans are looking for a top 6 type of finish this year, and I think they are the team that has the most variance this year. So a bold prediction that I'm willing to stand behind is I think that Erling Haaland will get to, this is a little crazy, 45 goals in the Premier League.
45 league goals.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
We'll see.
That's bold.
Maybe I should have left that for the next question, which is bold predictions that I'm not willing to stand behind, or at least will act like I never made if it doesn't happen.
Erling Haaland for 46 goals is the one that I'll act like I never made if it doesn't happen. No, I think the bold one that'll act like it never happened is something we've been riffing on probably here is going to be Newcastle at 2nd. So I'm going to look like a genius if it goes through. If it doesn't happen, it never happened.
And then bold prediction that I'll act like I never made if it doesn't happen is that I think that there's a chance Arsenal, Liverpool, or United has a new manager by the end of the year.
Wow, I like that a lot. That is, you're following the question to the letter. I appreciate that.
Those are crazy though, but I think the expectations for all those teams are rising. And I think it's too early, even if Ten Hag had a terrible season, I still think he would survive. And Klopp obviously has all the goodwill ever for Liverpool. That would be more of a resigned thing than a kind of being fired. And then Arteta, I think it's still too early to fire him, but that's why it's a bold prediction. But anyway, so I think that's everything. That's our top 10. That's who we think is going to win the league. That's who we think is going to win top scorer. Thanks for listening to us. Let us know if you guys have any questions, comments. If you want to make fun of the things that we said, feel free. You know where to find us on social media. It's at Premier League Proven on all the different social media apps. And that's us signing off. And soon we'll come to you with breakdowns of every team in the Premier League and why you should follow them, which is really, I think, going to be the thing that helps a lot of you guys that are looking for a team to follow figure out what team fits with you, what team fits with your personality, and who you should follow in the Premier League. But my first recommendation is start watching, see if a team catches your eye. And welcome to the Premier League season, Kevin. It's going to be a fun one.
Looking forward to every game.